Welcome into the At the Yard podcast for episode 110. I've got a very special guest today, another SoCal legend, if you will. Tulane University head coach Jay Uhlman joins the show. And Jay, thanks for making time to do this. It's
awesome. I'd love to say I could hear everything you just said, but they're out here cleaning my windows, so it's a little difficult. But it's great to be here. I appreciate it, and watched you do a couple of these. So anytime you can get on and talk college baseball, it's always a cool thing. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk college baseball, in general. We're going to talk specifically about Tulane baseball. And, but before we get there, we got to kind of set it up with, you as a person. And, we talked a little bit before we started recording, an all-world career at Redondo, if you will. And, went on to play at LA Harbor and then Nevada, where you guys were pretty darn good there in Nevada, led the country in double plays from what I understand, you as a shortstop. And, it kind of goes back to that SoCal shortstop thing, right? I mean, would you throw yourself in one of that class, right? I mean, we talk about it all the time.
Oh, man, I'd love to. There's a lot of really great ones that have come out. And, it's that's kind of where you first start shopping if you want a shortstop is Southern California. I don't know why, what the reason for that is, but California cool, I guess. But, it was great to play the position. And, I had loved my time in Redondo. That's near and dear to me. Obviously, I grew up there, so learned a lot at LA Harbor from Tony Bloomfield and a lot of guys that I played with. And so, I love being a part of the SoCal tradition and history for sure.
Yeah, so you talk about LA Harbor, right? The JUCO route. I mean, that seems to be, with the way things are going nowadays in recruiting, like that's going to be an explosion, for a lack of better terms. With JUCO baseball here in SoCal in particular, and California as a whole. Talk a little bit about your experiences at the JC level before going on to play at a 4-year school.
Yeah, it was, I kind of thought I was ready. Got lightly recruited by, a few people. I think Coach Savage sent me a letter when he was at Nevada. I got one from San Jose and Long Beach State. And that was about it. And, it was back then you actually sent it snail mail, and they sent you, a little letter, and you sent a questionnaire back. And I think it still kind of happens, but, I got drafted out of Redondo in 1992 in the 47th round, back when there were 50 rounds. My dad was dying for me to do it, but I knew I wasn't ready. I just started playing shortstop, and there was other things I needed. I wasn't elite in school. I was just learning my trade and my craft. So I went over to LA Harbor, who, at the time was dominating the junior college landscape, and, 3 state titles and 17 league championships. And at one point there was a period of 10 straight years where Harbor had sent a former player to Division I level, and they had played in Omaha for 10 straight years, which was really cool. So, you go with a lot of really great players and really great coaches, and it's a tough environment. I need a lot of things. I needed to be better in the classroom. I needed to get stronger. I needed more experience, and frankly, I needed more toughness, and that was kind of the place to go. So I did that, and it was well worth it. And I think if you look at now kind of today's day and age, I think it's maybe changing with the portal and high school kids and their families realizing how very difficult it is now, especially when we start going down to 34-man roster. It's going to get even tougher.
Yeah.
But, a lot of people pay to go to school these days. And so when you pay to go to high school, sometimes there's a turn your nose up kind of attitude at, well, I paid all this money to go to school, so I'll be damned if I'm going to send my kid to a junior college. But if your kid really loves playing baseball, you might be paying for junior college for a couple years, which last time I checked, you still get a 4-year degree from the place you finished school, not where you started. So you might be able to save a few bucks, take an extra vacation, and have your kid be at a place that they can develop. And it's hard to develop at this level because you only get so much time with the coaches, and you got school and a lot of different things going on. And back in my day, we'd play 40 fall games. They don't do that much anymore, but development only happens when you get an opportunity to play and perform and those kind of things. And a lot of times now it's so transactional where you do well, you stay. If you don't, they move you on, or you move yourself on because you need to go and develop. So I think the junior college level is perfectly acceptable and really going to be I think you're going to see a resurgence probably of the junior college level, especially moving into next year when you're talking about 305 schools cutting from 40 to 34. So there's going to be a lot of traffic.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, just there's so many opportunities now, right? And it's like you talked about that mindset of, hey, we pay for high school. I'm not sending my kid to a junior college. I mean, that even trickles down to public school kids, right? I mean, hey, we pay, a ton of money for our son to go play all summer and all fall with, club XYZ. There's no chance that he's not a Division I player right out the gate.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing is, it's not the business model in baseball. It's usually you pay for something, you get a service. It's like, let me talk to your boss, or let me talk to the the head waiter, or those kind of things. It's college baseball. It's not that way, and I think what happens is there becomes this sense that the natural progression is we provide these opportunities for our kids, which is great. You want a better life for your kids, and you're giving them the opportunity to train and get better and be with kids that, learning from other players is almost, if not more important than learning from coaches too, and so to be able to have those opportunities to go and travel and go to Atlanta and go to, Peoria and those kind of things, they're all valuable, and there are things of value that you can spend your money on. But the thing with baseball is it doesn't care how much money you give it. It doesn't care the color of your skin, what religion you choose to follow, or what political leanings you have. The game is the game. And so it's going to reward you proportionally for the things that you put into it, and no amount of money is going to help those things. It certainly gives you the best chance to continue development and get at bats and innings pitched and stuff. But you need to be in a place where you can play, and as a head coach, part of my job is to, at the end of the fall and at the end of the spring, is to evaluate our players holistically. And where are they? Are they, is this good for them? Do I see them having the opportunity to develop here? Or are we going to go out in the portal and try to get better than that at the time, which it stunts the developmental growth of the player that needs that second and third year. And no offense, but it's hard. We won 19 games my first year. If we would have won 19 games again in year 2, I wouldn't have a roof over my kid's head. So there is a business element that goes with that. And so my job is to evaluate that at the end of the year and try to put the players in the best position for their development. MLB has gone to 20 rounds in the draft, and we're going down to 34. And so opportunities are becoming fewer and far between. And so for me, I think the faster you can get in a situation where you can play and develop, I think you got to take those options. And if not, you got to be ready to decide that where you're going to school is where you're going to go to school, and you're going to hang up the cleats and the glove.
Yeah. So following on that, I mean, you obviously got the opportunity to develop there at LA Harbor, spent a couple of years at Nevada, as mentioned, before becoming a graduate assistant there at Nevada. Was at some point you had to make the decision, man, maybe this coaching thing is for me. I want to do it. How did that come about for you? How did you decide, I'm going to give this coaching thing a shot?
Well, I'm like everybody else. I wanted to keep playing until they took it away from me. And unfortunately for me, I was, again, at the time it was 50 rounds. So back in the day, how it kind of worked, the free agent deal worked, was if you didn't get drafted, you kind of stayed in shape. You played in some summer ball and you stayed in shape, and let the pro teams kind of figure out, like, okay, who are they releasing? Who are they signing? Who weren't they signing? What needs that individual teams had. And then you were hoping the area scout would call you, and, you'd be a filler for that. And you'd go take an opportunity to try to, take your shot at sticking. I was playing in a summer league, and I got a 4-6 feet on a double play. I was turning it from short, and a guy slid from me to you and broke my fib and tib and clean in half. So I had, I got a rod and 3 screws still to this day in my leg, and that pretty much made the decision for me. My days were over playing. I had 1 year left of school. I went back to Nevada. They had Jason Gill and Stan Stolte, were the assistants. Gary Powers was the head coach. So I went back as a GA, finished my degree, kind of learned the ropes. And then I never wanted to sit behind a desk with a suit and tie. I was either probably going to help kids or families in some form or fashion, or I was going to try my hand at coaching. And Tony Bloomfield had just left LA Harbor. He was my coach, and he went to Cosumnes River in Northern California. And Jano Schuler took over. Jano was a pitching coach for John Herbal, the legend at Cal State LA and Lakewood High School. Yeah. So Jano was Tony's pitching coach the last couple of years at Harbor. Jim O'Brien, who is a Hall of Famer and won 2 state titles there, handed the reins over to Jano. I went back as an assistant, lived back at home, trying to figure out if this is really what I wanted to do. And it was. We had a terrible year. Jano got released from his position, and then Coach O'Brien handed me the keys to the car, and the rest is history. Spent 2 years there, and then went on to 26 more years or 27 more years of Division I baseball.
Yeah, I mean, let's not gloss over the fact you got made it super regional in your second year there at LA Harbor either. I mean, that's a big deal, right? I mean, that obviously propelled you probably in the eyes of other coaches. I mean, particularly going back to Nevada as a paid assistant, and then moving on to Oregon, where you and I met, about a dozen years ago. So, yeah. I mean, let's not gloss over those important details, right? But so you go back to Nevada, you spend, it looks about 7 or 8 years there before heading over to Oregon. Oregon just revived their program. You go back up there, you go up to Eugene, and it seems as though that's kind of really where things start to take off for you as a coach.
Yeah. So, I was a 25-year-old head coach at my junior college. And we did get better each year. I think we had 36. We were 36-8 my last year there as a head coach, and lost to a really good Riverside City team. Dennis Rogers was the head coach. Andrew Checketts was the pitching coach. Rojo may have even been there, Coach Rojo. I can't remember, but they were really good. They look like teams look now, physical and big, and we were really happy that we were going to host it, didn't have to travel to the Orange Empire. And in retrospect, I wish they would have sent us there, because our park played like a little league park for those big physical guys. And they beat us handily in 2 games. And we had, at that point, we had lost 6 games all year, I think. So did really well there, went back to Reno, and kind of did what we did. We had a lot of good teams that probably underachieved. There were times we had a lot of big leaguers. I think that's one thing about Nevada that was a little bit under the radar, is we had a lot of big leaguers. On my team, my last year playing, we had 5 big leaguers. At one point in 2003, my second year coaching there, we had 5 big leaguers. So there were a lot of big leaguers out of there, and we just grinded, and I tried to build relationships with the players, and I've always kind of been more of a player's coach. Relationships matter. I'm not a transactional type of person. I don't operate that way. Certainly there are times when being transactional is important, because the results are the results, and those matter, but everybody's got a story and everybody's got personal things. And so the relationship part's really important to me. But, I went to Oregon and was a volunteer in the first year for Coach Horton. He had Coach Checketts and Coach Kirby as paid assistants. And he wanted to try to pay me. And I said, Coach, I'm going to take out my retirement. Don't worry about it. We're going to live frugally, and I'm going to do this like I'm a full-time guy. And, I did that. I felt like I didn't do anything different than I had ever done. But the difference for me was I went from Nevada, which was, respected, but it was still a mid-major kind of up and coming. It was Nevada, so to speak. And I guess I could say that because I played there. So I understand what that means. But now I go to, Oregon, and it's the Pac-12, and it's, as I called it, the Coach Horton gold card, guys that work for him. I guess it's like guys that want Saban's coaches, some work out and some don't, but there's that thing that you get when you work for a guy like that. You get some credibility. And so we went up there, and they had won 14 games a year before I got there. And when I showed up, we won 40. And, maybe people thought that me showing up was part of that. I'd like to think so, but at the same time, the players play, and I think it's year 2 and it's different, and they're hungry. And we had some really damn good players in pitching, and Coach Checketts' pitching staff was incredible. And but we won some games. And then I ended up getting a job at Kansas for 6 months. Richie Price needed a coach because he had lost John Sheff to Kansas State because Andy Sawyer went somewhere else. There was just a whole trickle down in January, literally 2 weeks before first official practice. And the well was going to run dry in the camp. And I had 2 young kids at the time. And I didn't first, I had passed up 3 jobs the summer prior after year 1 at Oregon. Larry Lee offered me a job. Troy Buckley at Long Beach State had offered me a job. And then Cal State Bakersfield had offered me, Riverside had offered me a job. And I turned them all down because coach made it okay financially for me to come back. But some things had happened. And so this job fell out of the sky, basically, kind of at the right time. And I didn't want to leave, but I had to. At the time, I think I was paying $75,000 plus benefits, which was more than I had. And so it was a recruiting coordinator job, a hitting coach job, and with 2 people that I knew, Richie Price and Ryan Graves, who was a pitching coach there, and a former trainer of ours at Nevada named Ken Wainwright. So there was familiarity there. I'd never been to Lawrence, went there, spent 6 months. And then Coach Horton called me back when Andrew left to be the head coach at Santa Barbara, and Kirby went back to Cal State Fullerton, and I think it's, I always tell people, it's easier. Recruiting is difficult, but it's easier to recruit and get in the conversation when you have Coach Horton as a gold card. You got the Pac-12, you got the University of Oregon. I always joke with the young coaches. It's like, you want to see how good of a recruiter you are, call somebody at, 8 in the morning, like I did Lucas Duda one time when I was at Nevada. And it was, hey, this is Coach Uhlman from Nevada. How you doing, pal? I'm sleeping, coach. Okay, cool. I'll talk to you later. Versus another guy I called a few years later, and I was from Oregon, and all of a sudden, it's 8 in the morning, and all of a sudden it's, I've been up, I lifted, I hit some already. So there's a different aura when you're calling with a different logo that's maybe a little bit sexier. And so I always choose to, tell people that I didn't do anything. The irony of the whole thing is the opportunities that were given to me or earned, however you want to look at them, through my time with Coach Horton. Certainly he had a ton to do with that. Our success during our time there had a lot to do with that. But like, I always felt, I kind of giggled a little bit all the time because like I was the same person I ever was that I was at Nevada. I coached the same way with my heart on my sleeve and passionately and energetically and with relationships first. And, but because of where I was, the importance of being where you are really made a difference for me. And as you said, it just kind of took off, but it didn't really take off. It still took me 26 more years to get in the chair of being a head coach, which was out of my control. I just kept my head down and tried to stay humble and keep working. And, some years were better than others.
Yeah. So after a pretty good year at Oregon, you decided to head down to Tulane. COVID, right? I mean,
yes.
That was COVID year when you went down there, and you guys lost the season. Or walk us through that. I mean, what went through the decision to go down to Tulane?
Yeah,
obviously assistant coach, recruiting coordinator, but then hey, I'm in a new place in an area where I'm not too familiar with. COVID.
Yep. Yeah. So in 19, it was our last year at Oregon. Coach Horton had a third year option that Oregon and him mutually agreed to part ways. That basically left the job open. I was the interim for a little while, mostly to kind of hold the fort while they were trying to figure out what direction they wanted to go. I got a legit interview. I mean, Rob Mullins and Eric Riddell sat with me for 3+ hours. Jimmy Stanton as well. And it was a real interview. It wasn't a 45 token. Hey, let's just give this guy an interview. I will always appreciate, even if it was a token, I didn't feel like it was. So I appreciated that. And I truly believe had we done better in the last 4 years that I was there, I think there was a chance that I could have still been there. But I understood why the decision was made that they made. They ultimately, brought Waz back and hired him. He called me about 5 hours later, and before he even had anything to say to me, whether he was going to keep me or move on from me, I just told him, hey, look, I coach infielders, I coach hitting, I'm recruiting. You do all the same things. I said, I don't think it's good for either one of us at this point to stay together. And so I'm going to make it easy on you, and I'm going to head in a different direction. I didn't have a direction. I had no job, but I knew that was for the betterment of both him and I, and probably the program. So I moved on, needed a job, a lot of soul searching, a couple opportunities. Jeremy Beard, who was the head coach at Bakersfield at the time, had offered me a job. I wasn't sure that I wanted to go there. I have a great relationship with him, but I didn't necessarily think that was going to be the answer at that point. And so I just kind of hung in there and waited and see what happened, and I was on my way back from a thing in Utah with my daughter. She had a ballet summer intensive there, and we were on our way back, and I got a call from Travis saying, "Hey, my guy took a job as a volunteer at LSU. Would you be interested?" I said, "Absolutely, I'd be interested." I'd never been to New Orleans. I'd been to Shreveport and Ruston because when I was at Nevada, we played Louisiana Tech. And so I'd never been to New Orleans. Obviously, you hear it's crime and it's dirty and it's this and that. And it's actually getting better. That's the cool thing. The crime rate's way down, knock on wood. And it's an awesome place, but we can talk more about that later. But I came down here and recruiting coordinator, helping with the hitting, did the infielders, those kind of things. And bang, we're a month into it, and we're 15-2, and we're rolling with Long Beach State coming into town, and the world stopped, and we didn't get it back, and so that's kind of how it shook out. I got one Mardi Gras in, I got one parade in January or in February or January, whatever it was, and then we couldn't go outside anymore, or we couldn't go indoors with anyone anymore, so just crazy.
Yeah. So then Jew takes off.
Yep.
You're interviewed again. You're obviously hired as the head coach. Talk to me about that process, the interview process at Oregon, and how that sets you up to crush the interview at Tulane. That's
an awesome question. And I'm going to start with this. So when I was a younger coach, I coached with Coach Bowers, and it was just a different time. And there was things you did and you didn't do. And, I always talked to him about not always, but hey, I think maybe I should try to interview for why you want to interview for that job. You got a job. I'm like, no, I get that. But just preparing me for these things, because until you get in those things, you really have no idea what they're about, and the more interviews that I was able to do, the more comfortable I got with the line of questioning and what they're really looking for, and not just some canned answer or those kind of things. And, so I had done a few up until that point, but then I got into to the Oregon one, and it was, it's just, what's your vision of the program, and how's it going to be different with you as the head coach versus what you've been the associate head coach for the last 4 years. And you guys have, pretty much kept your head above water around the 500 mark. And then there hasn't the trajectory at best flatlined, and at worst had dipped and tried to come back up. We weren't heading on that trajectory. Who your staff's going to be, just kind of those kind of things, and so those processes really helped me for when I got this opportunity to interview. And frankly, I was just like, here we go again. I can't believe this. This will be the third time I've had to find a different job. What did I do wrong? It's the woe is me. I'm feeling sorry for myself, which is the opposite of how you should be. But in both instances at Oregon and at Tulane, I took the interim piece like it was my job, and that's how we were going to continue to recruit. And I'm just going to do this like it's my job. And, but when I got into that deal with Tulane, and it was, ultimately, I'll be honest with you and transparent, I think it ultimately fell in my lap, which I think you have to have those things. I think they wanted to hire Jake Gautreaux. He's a former legend here at Tulane. I think they kicked the tires and probably potentially offered the job to Sean Allen because he was here in 15 and 16 with David Pierce. I don't know that for sure, but I know he was in the mix. So I think there were a couple other people, and I think, if you ask Troy Dannon, the AD, he probably says I was the guy from the get-go, which is not the truth, and that's okay. But if it's okay, that doesn't bother me. Mike Matoso, who's the AD at St. Mary's, that was another interview I had after kind of the whole Oregon thing shook out. Mike's unbelievable, former baseball player, great AD. Interviewed down there, and he said, he goes, "Hey man, UCLA is my dream job," and he goes, I wouldn't care if they offered it to 5 other people and they turned it down and I'm the 6th guy, I still have the job.
Right.
You know, and so that kind of really stuck with me and really hit home. And it's true, you know, sometimes you need certain circumstances. I certainly didn't want Jew to, you know, lose his job. And, you know, as an assistant, that's a reflection too. Like I don't want that. I came here to help him make the program better and help him, you know, and we were 15-2 in year 1. And I was like, all right, sweet. Like I came here with that purpose and we got better. And, you know, it wasn't terrible in the years I was here. Just at Tulane, it's like, if you're not winning 50 games and going to Omaha, there's a older version of the fan base here that remembers the glory days here. We certainly want to get back there, and that's what we're striving for every single day, to make people proud. But when you have this vision of what you hold on to because that was earned, and then you have the version that was when Travis was taken over from David Pierce, and he's trying to build the program. It's hard, and people's expectations are different, and they can have those expectations. But like I was saying, it's just like I didn't want that to happen, but that kind of fell in my lap. And sometimes you need those opportunities to kind of prove your worth. And, you know, every single day I come to work, I'm trying to prove I'm trying to prove Troy Dannon right for ultimately getting it right. I like to say you got the right guy for the job. That's just my opinion. So,
yeah. Well, you know, you talk about the glory days there at Tulane, and I think nationally it may not be a well-known story, right? But I mean, that is a proud program with a long history of quality players, not only collegiate players, but big leaguers, and just, you know, a history of winning. And you talk about people's opinions of the glory days and this and that, but I mean, you might have, you know, ignited a fire with those people last year, right? I mean, going all the way, you know, you win the AAC championship, you make it to a regional, kind of the surprise team, if you will, out of that conference, right? I think there's a couple other teams in your conference that maybe have thought, hey, we got this in the bag, but you guys had an incredible season last year.
Thank you.
You know, just talk about that and how that's going to serve as kind of the building blocks for, you know, the rest of your time there.
Yeah, it's 30 big leaguers, 23 trips to the postseason, 17 conference championships, 2 trips to Omaha. Really, 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 really good players that have come through here. And I actually feel, I'll be honest, I compare it a little bit to Harbor that way, just in terms of the proud tradition that is here. And a lot of people love it. The guys that played here have great passion for Tulane baseball, you know, and their educational opportunities that provide for them long after their playing days are over. So that part really speaks to the soul of how I grew up playing baseball, with the tradition and the standard that's here. So I love it. I embrace it. Like, if I turn my computer around, I got all the trophies from the past and current in my office every day. You know, you can see the two teams back here from the last 2 years and back to back. The last time Tulane won back-to-back conference championships, whether regular season or conference, was 1998-99. So that had been a while since that happened. We hadn't been back to a regional. So 2023, my first year as a head coach, when our record sucked and we were the worst team to ever get in the postseason. Ironically, that's the first time we'd been in the postseason in 7 years, you know, so it's not like we were rolling out regional appearances for the last 25 or 30 straight years. It had been a while since we had done that, you know. And so a lot of things transpired over the last couple of years that we're slowly starting to get the trajectory back up. I think 36 wins, which is what we had last year, was the 3rd most wins since 2009. So as proud and as great as our tradition is, it kind of been just kind of in neutral a little bit, you know, some good times and some neutrals and some good times, and just weren't able for whatever reason to get an opportunity to be in the postseason. And, you know, we did it the hard way in year 1 and won the conference tournament, which is the only way you can get in automatically, and spoiled a lot of people's postseason hopes that year. And then this past year, you know, we won 36 games and finally won one in a regional. That was the first time since 16 too. So gradually taking some steps forward. And I think when you get the opportunity to compete in the postseason, it serves a lot of things well. It serves your coaching staff well, because you're used to being in those environments and how to coach through those environments and manage the players and the pitchers and those kind of things. But really, where it really bears fruit is with the guys that play every single day. And we had a lot of the guys back. The nucleus was back last year for the second, phase of the back-to-back. And we'll have 20 players that got to experience that last year in our dugout again this year. So kind of the floor continues to start a little bit higher each and every year in the standard and the expectations. And just a knowledge that, hey, we didn't just get to the regional and go 2 and Q. We went and we got one this past year. So for me, getting that one out of the way was a big one, because we know how to win a tournament, and winning tournaments is really difficult. It's really, really difficult. So you got to have a lot of things go your way. You got to play really well, and be battle tested. So I think all those things help serve us well from the experiences that we've had. And again, every team and every year is different, but just having that, getting in those environments has been really, really important for this program.
Jay, one of the things that I saw last year was one of the coolest things watching a Tulane game. I think you guys might have been playing. No, it wasn't Northwestern. I can't remember who. It might have been ECU. And I see this little guy coming back with a bat with Uhlman on his back, and I'm thinking to myself, that's got to be the coolest feeling as a dad ever, right? I mean, I'm a dad. You're obviously a dad. I've had some similar type moments with my son, but I mean, you get to share that with your son every single day. That's got to be the coolest thing you get to do at work.
It's really special. And, I've got an 18-year-old daughter. She's been a bat girl at Oregon. And then I have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old. And to be able to have them in the dugout, Coach Horton's got a long, proud tradition of bat boys in the Cal State Fullerton dugout, and to have my kids be able to do a little bit of that at Oregon was really special for him. And then bringing them here and having them run bats and balls and deal with the umpires, to get compliments from the umpires about how good the kids are, not only in their job, but as kids and respectful, really means a lot. And the crazy thing, even more gratifying. I mean, there's a lot of reasons you win championships are gratifying, but from a dad perspective, to just put those glasses on. Sawyer, my youngest, got to be the bat boy in the championship game my first year as the head coach. Kai, who's my middle, he had to go back for finals in high school, as did my wife. So those two didn't get to enjoy the experience of winning, especially not figuring we were probably going to do a whole lot. And so the spectacular aspect of that run, Sawyer got to be a part of and be the bat boy. And, Kai was so upset that he wasn't there. So to be able to go back this year and then have Kai be the bat boy and have that, and get him to have that experience was extra special. And then my wife obviously had to be there too, which was cool. So it's awesome to have your kids there. I think, for me, I think it sets an example for your players. You talk about a family, you talk about being a great father and a husband and those kind of things. But I think when you immerse your family into that, I think, and you'll hear coaches talk about it all the time, but to set that example for your players, I think is more valuable than probably anything that we do. So many times as coaches, I've played for guys and been around coaches that when it doesn't go well, they're really pissed. And when you win, they're really happy and they treat your families accordingly. I never wanted to subscribe to that. I was going to try to be the same guy, whether we won or we lost, because it's not the family's fault. It's not the kid's fault. You don't just shoo them off the field when you lose and let them on when you win. To me, that's front runner. So to be able to show that example to our players every single day is something I take very seriously and I have a lot of pride in.
Yeah, I just thought that was the coolest thing, man. I was like, I can't wait to talk to Jay about that. That's sweet. But Jay, let's pivot a little bit. We were talking a little bit before we started recording this, just kind of the chaos that is college baseball right now, right? I mean, there's no other word for it. I think, well, there's a few other, but none that we can use on this podcast. But, it's a little bit chaotic right now in the world of just recruiting in college baseball, right? I mean, we'll just start there with just kind of the generalization of recruiting, obviously with NIL, with the transfer portal, the ability for players to play into their mid-20s, it seems like, is pretty nuts, right? And so, I mean, I just wanted to get kind of your take, just an overarching take, right? I mean, we'll dive into some specifics here in a second, but just like your overarching take on on the world of college baseball recruiting right now?
Man, I'm glad I'm not a high school kid. It's really tough for the high school player right now. It's the NIL. Some have it, some don't. Some say they have it and they don't. I think it's hard to kind of know. It's a lot of gray area. I think you're probably going to see a lot of changes coming here very shortly to kind of how that's all going to look. It went from you can't use it to inducement and they got to do something for it to like everybody just, it's like they're paying guys. At least that's what it feels like, paying them to do nothing, to play basically. So now I'm sure that's not happening, but that's the way it feels. And I think there's so much misinformation in terms of those kind of things, or who has what and who's going to do what. But I think it's a really difficult time to be a high school player. You're competing against, it's an older game. It's a more physical game. It's an experienced game. Cause if you got the opportunity to have a guy with 600 career at bats versus a high school kid with 0, I think who probably wins that battle most of the time. And there's going to be plenty of room for high school players. It's just, you're not going to, except for the big boys, you're probably not going to see your 15, 16, 19 man recruiting classes anymore. Like for us, we've got 6 in this class or 5 in this class. And I don't see us changing that philosophy anytime soon, especially with us going to 34 man roster. They still haven't told us is that going to be at the start of the fall or traditionally like before the first game in January or in February. So still don't know where some of the rules fall, but extremely difficult for high schoolers right now that are not in that top 1%, 2%. The developmental kind of guy, there's not a lot of room for those guys anymore. So again, I feel for high school players at this point.
I mean, realistically though, even that top 1 or 2%, right? I mean, those guys, you're still an 18-year-old kid, right? You might be physical, you might be very talented. Obviously take the top 5-10 guys out of the equation, right? But I mean, after those guys, you might be really physical, really talented, but you're still going in and competing against, like you said, a guy that has 600 college at bats, a guy that's 22 years old, that is physically more mature than you are. Yep. So even for those guys, it still seems like, at least on the surface, that it's going to be a challenge.
It is. And there's just so many things that an old guy brings that a young guy doesn't. It's knowing how to handle your business. It's gratitude. A lot of times we'll get guys that come from the upper levels down. I think you're seeing that the kind of the P5 structure, those guys aren't getting the time. They become disillusioned with kind of the process that they're encountering, and they kind of come back down to where they need to develop, right? Kind of like what I talked about earlier about, hey, it's not happening for you here. You need to go somewhere where you're going to develop. So top down and then from the bottom up, a lot of times you'll see the guys from the quote power or mid-major level that have good years that try to get up and play in the, in the Power 5 structure because they didn't get that opportunity and they had a great year and they want to go have those opportunities. And sometimes the grass is greener and a lot of times it's not, but I think when you're not having to filter through entitlement, you're not having to filter through, guys not understanding that the weight room's a serious business. And having to do a class load at that and tutors and training and the list goes on and on, and not even talking about travel during the season or not traveling during the season when your team's away from you and now you're home by yourself and are you really getting work in? And, so there are a lot of challenges for freshmen that they're not going through those things and those older guys already have, but, somebody's got to take freshmen and people are going to continue to take them, but it's going to, the opportunity to be that 35th through 40th guy and kind of survive a year or two. I think those things are going to go away. And it's going to be harder to have those developmental pieces for us because we need the guys to be kind of ready to rock and roll and go, especially with 34.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you live this every day, right? I mean, I follow it every day, but you live this every day. Do you get the feeling or the impression that I mean, the powers that be are just kind of saying, well, let's see if this works. Let's try this. Let's see if that works. I mean, it seems a lot of these things seem very anecdotal, right? I mean, it's not as though it doesn't make a whole lot of sense on the surface as to what the long-term benefit or what the long-term reasoning is behind doing some of these things.
Yeah, it's you almost feel like it's they opened Pandora's box and went, oh man, we can't stuff that thing back in there. Here, you guys take this because we don't want to get sued. You guys take that because we don't want to get sued. Let's give them that so they'll go away. And it's kind of a runaway train now. And it's kind of, the horse is out of the barn, and they're trying to figure out how to put it back in Pandora's box. And I don't know where it's going to go from here. You hear the talk about the 70 teams and what is the Rudy League or whatever. I mean, it's conceivable within innuendo and rumor to think that there's already multiple levels of college athletics, but even more so, and so it's all about the money piece. And if you're the SEC and the ACC, Big 12, Big 10 and SEC, I mean, are you really wanting to share your revenue with everybody else? And so it becomes a money grab, and it's almost like let's just figure it out later and hope nobody sues us. So it's a very tenuous time for sure.
To your points about recruiting a little bit ago about, the portal guys, the older guys versus the younger guys, do you think that's going to have any impact on the recruiting calendar as we know it? Do you think they'll take you guys off the road more? I mean, I've had conversations with guys that are like, look, man, I'm not married. I'm a single guy. Like, this is my life. This is my job. I want to be out on 4th of July. I want to be out on Memorial Day weekend watching these tournaments. I don't have a home to be with wife and kids like you and I both do. Yep. Do you think that that's going to be impacted at all by this kind of portal free for all?
I don't know. I think it probably all comes back down to money. Do the institutions want to continue to pay? You guys are getting the portal and you're not going on the road recruiting out of the portals. And some are, right? You go into the summer leagues now. Like I remember when I was playing, you would see coaches out at college games because you had the transfer and, hell, you even had a mid-year transfer. So I think there's a little bit more of that where guys are going out to recruit some summer leagues. But at the same time, I mean, I guess it's plausible to think that, they shorten or try to shorten the window of recruiting. I think some of that has to pass through the coaches part of that. But I mean, I don't know. Part of our job, a lot of our job is recruiting. So I don't know about taking that away. I don't think they'll probably ever vote that any different. I think we've already made some concessions that, work-life balance for sure, I think is important. I think we all, regardless if you have kids or you don't have kids, sometimes it's nice to just go out and play 18 or hell, sit on your couch and watch college football, but at the same time, we're all here to coach and win games and develop players and watch the journey of each team that we coach every single year. So I don't know, long-winded. But the short answer is, I suppose that they could shorten that down. But what shortens is the high school part. Cause I remember 2 years ago, this was the first June I didn't even go on the road to watch a high school event. 26 years of recruiting at this level. I have always been out in June, like right after the season's over, and been through multiple weeks of events. And this was the first time in June I had never been out. And I'm still recruiting as a head coach. I get out there and help them evaluate and babysit some guys and reevaluate guys. But it was all about the portal and getting the visits and trying to plug the holes in your roster before you went out and tried to get with the high school kids. And I think part of that also happens because we're now not recruiting 5 levels of kids. We're not recruiting 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, junior college, Division I transfers, 7, so because they took us out of the freshman and sophomore business, I think that's been good for business. Yeah. I feel like we're more like the old pro scouts where we're getting to a point where we're able to see them closer to not a finished product, but closer to a product that you can at least kind of go like, okay, this fits here versus, hey, he's a freshman or he's a sophomore and I really like his tools. And then you figure out 2 years later, like, oh boy, he can't play, and that's a bad place to be.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And obviously that led to, a lot of scholarships getting pulled late in the game. And now we're seeing, scholarships getting pulled late in the game because of a roster reduction.
Yes.
Right. And, these kids left scrambling to find a place. And, how does that impact you when it comes to high school recruiting, right? I mean, obviously nobody wants to be that coach that recruits a ton of kids and then at the end of the day says, hey man, there's no place for you. You got to go somewhere else, right? Nobody wants to do that. Kills reputation, kills morale, could kill a program. But when it comes to Tulane and for you personally, like how does that impact the way you're recruiting high school players?
Well, the bottom line and transparent, there's no way to avoid roster attrition, whether it's current players or incoming players. It's part of the business. I mean, we have an obligation. If we don't win, we don't have jobs, and that's the transactional nature of it. The hardest part is when you really take pride in the relationship part and developing that with not only the recruit, but the families. That's when it becomes difficult to say the truth, but to also make the ultimate decision that's best for both the program and the player, even though it doesn't feel like that at the time. I just went through that. We just went through that yesterday, that we had that conversation with somebody and we're going down to 34 and we went from 6 guys to 5 guys. And, we all have to get better every single year, and if we don't continue to get better and, we're all held accountable for those kind of things. But I think you really try to do the very best you can with the information that you have. You try to do the very, very best you can to be as fair as you can, to communicate as well as you can. And there's going to be times you miss it, you screw it up and it's ugly. And then there's going to be times you nail it, you do everything right. You follow all the protocols of what you feel like is acting in good faith and people are still pissed. But, I always talk about the shoe being on the other foot. It's like, then don't sign a professional contract after we have committed to you. And now you're basically decommitting and leaving us to sign a professional contract. Yeah, coach, but it's for money and the dream. I get that. But that's a roster spot too. And we passed on other players, and so like we pass on other players. That's kind of one of the things too in the recruiting thing as well. We could have said yes to 5 or 6 other schools that were recruiting us at the time. And the answer is, yeah, you absolutely could have, and you didn't. We all made decisions in good faith. But at the same time, if we recruited you at a certain value and a certain talent level, and now we get close to the time when we've got to start making decisions to follow through or to move in a direction, and you've gone backwards, those 5 or 6 schools would be having the same conversation we're having with you now, because you're not 89 to 90 or 83 to 84 to 85 as a senior in high school. So that's not a valid argument, So it's like, I don't complain about it. It is what it is. Guys are going to sign professionally. Guys are going to decommit from you. Guys are going to get in the transfer portal. And so everybody's going to do what they think is in their best interest for them. And so we have to act accordingly, like the player and the family. And not that it becomes transactional. We try to do it in best faith and good faith and relationship building and transparency and honesty. And sometimes even when you do that, it doesn't work out and it can get messy. It's the unfortunate part of the business of college athletics. And I don't like it, but it is what it is.
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, it is unfortunate and it is what it is, unfortunately.
It sucks.
Yeah. Let's talk about the calendar a little bit. And I mean, Jay, because, I look forward to seeing you every year down in Atlanta.
Yep.
I see you down there for a week and it's awesome. Then we come back here. I see you back here in SoCal usually at the area code games, the other event up there in Thousand Oaks area. I mean, how have you kind of adjusted the schedule, right? I mean, obviously you talked about, yes, head coach, I wasn't out in June. How have you adjusted your schedule now as the head coach versus being the recruiting coordinator, getting out to see guys?
Yeah. So for me, the bulk of my time is spent more so in how can I help our coaches and our players get what they need, be the best versions of themselves, have all the tools for development, the Edgertronics cameras and the TrackMans and the blast motions and the core velo belts and the Normatex for recovery and the Theragun. Like how can I get our guys what they need? Alumni relation development and retention, donor functions, public speaking, podcast talking about our program. So my time is spent more that way versus when I was an assistant, which was practice planning daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, to planning recruiting events, recruiting trips, visits, all those things that go with being a recruiting coordinator. I'm now kind of more like the cross checker, go out and, watch the guys we have committed and continue that kind of relationship building and letting them know like, hey, yeah, you're important to us. The head coach is here watching you. And because I know from the recruiting side, when I was a recruiting coordinator, the head coach title carries, as it should, tremendously more weight than a recruiting coordinator. I would get so damn frustrated, going up against Pat Casey and Jay Johnson at Arizona and John Savage at UCLA and all those guys in the pack, where I'd, be in the mix for everybody. And then they would go in there and ruin it. So learning the value of the head coach, doesn't have to be grinding it like the recruiting coordinator, but you need to be present and you need to be engaged and you need to be on top of those things and being out there helping and being seen. I think the face of the program part is it's the CEO lifestyle in terms of being out there in the forefront, taking the blame when things go bad and trying to pass the praise when everything goes right, so that's kind of been the difference.
Yeah, everyone wants to see and hear from the head coach, right? That's ultimately what it comes down to. But let's hear from the head coach here as we talk about Tulane headed into 2025, and obviously coming off the AAC championship, made a regional last year. You mentioned you have 20 guys coming back from last year's roster that experience that. Give us a quick preview or not so quick, however you'd like, preview of the 2025 Tulane Green Wave here.
Big and physical, more athletic than we were last year. I'm just really excited about this group of I think they're self-aware. I think they're self-led, which is really great. You gotta, before you can lead anybody, you got to be able to lead yourself. They've been extremely accountable to each other. We've had very few, kind of as we're now into year 3, there's more continuity. The same coaching staff's back, has been here for 3 years. So the older guys now have a really good foundation of how we talk, our language, the way we do things, what's acceptable, what's not. And it's a good feeling this year because I'm not the one that's just standing out there all the time, holding every single person accountable for every single thing, every minute of the day. I certainly don't shy away from that. I'm definitely not afraid of conflict. That's part of this job and part of being a leader. You got to be able to do some uncomfortable things, but being able to just kind of sit back from that, mile high view and be able to sprinkle myself around watch our pitchers do their thing and offensively and defensively and those kind of things is cool. But, we're very left-handed, which is really cool, and not on the mound as much as we'd like. But I think our collective velocity and our stuff and our command has ticked up and improved. So I think we knocked off 2.5 off our ERA from year to year last year. I think it's reasonable to think, just looking at what I'm looking at, that we could probably knock that down a tick this year as well. I think we're trending up in the offensive piece of that. So I really like where we're at. We're going to play good defense, pitching and defense. Obviously, I'm a West Coast guy, so those things are important. But we do like to hit homers, and we can do that frequently. And we're in a really good place physically. I last year came up with a kind of a thing called Built to Last. I want us to, when we get into June, instead of our jam jobs being soft liners to the shortstop, they're the tweener in between the infielder and the outfielder. Instead of the left fielder catching it on the warning track, it's actually a homer. Instead of us down 5 miles an hour in our velos, we're still PRing in our velos at the end of the year, which we did last year. We made tremendous gains. I think we had a 210-pound average of our starting position players and the bulk of our pitching staff. So we're trying to increase that again to get that in that 212, 215 range. And that takes a lot of hard work in the weight room and nutritionally and providing them opportunities. We've got 2 big old refrigerators. We stock that thing full of stuff every Monday. And, because if you're going to ask them to push the weights and be built to last, you got to make sure that they're fueling their bodies the right way and continuing to keep on the weight. So I really like where we're at. I think we're one of the more physical teams in the league. And, East Carolina's been the standard bearer in this league for several years. And I always say, if you want to be the bully, you got to beat the bully. And fortunately, we've walked off with the trophy the last 2 years, not the regular season one. That's kind of on the checklist for the guys. That's kind of one of their motivators this year, is they want the regular season championship, but you're going to have to pry that from East Carolina's hands because they got that, and so our mission is to try to be the standard bearer in the league. And I have a lot of respect for East Carolina and Cliff Godwin and their program. They do a lot of things right, and they play hard and they play tough. And you have to play your very best to beat teams like that. And our league in general is pretty physical, a lot of hard throwers and really good coaches in this league. So, we're excited about where we are, certainly not satisfied, but really happy with the trajectory of the program. And particularly, I think in the initial returns of this team, I think we've taken another step forward.
One of my favorite things is watching games from across around the country, right? You mentioned ECU. They hosted a regional a couple of years ago. That was electric. I've seen a couple of games at your place. The atmosphere at a game at Tulane, for example, which for purposes of this conversation, we'll call a mid-major,
yep.
Right? Versus say a mid-major on the West Coast, it's night and day. Like, what is it about where you're at that, baseball just matter. Baseball and college sports, for that matter just so much.
Yeah, and it's really true. Obviously, spending the bulk of my life on the West Coast, I can speak to that. The passion runs deep, especially for the sport of baseball in the South. There's no place like it, and the financial backing that it gets is second to none too. And so. But it's like any other thing, to be honest with you. You got to win and you got to have a good product for people to come out and watch. But I just think, and I'll just take Southern California, for example, when I was growing up, we'd go to Blair Field, we'd go out to Dado, we'd go to Jackie Robinson, we'd go to Dodger games, Angel games. We'd go all over, even UC Irvine when I was a little kid before they went back to Division II. There's just so many dang things to do there. The weather's so perfect. There's the beach and this, it's all the cliches about California. There's so many things to do. But I think the other thing is you have a lot of transplants in California. I think if you walked on a camp, and I'll take Nevada, my alma mater, for example, I can't speak for it today, but when I was there, you would walk on campus and you'd see every other school's logo except for your own, Duke and Carolina and UCLA and USC. But like going back to Southern California, you have so many people from so many different places. Their allegiances are elsewhere. And so why would they go to a USC game or a UCLA game or any school for that matter? Whereas people here, there's regional loyalties, there's city loyalties. When I got to New Orleans, they'd ask me when I first got here, hey, what school did you go to? And I'd be like, no, I went to the University of Nevada. They said, no. What high school did you go to? So it runs that deep where they put bumper stickers of their high school. You see grownups driving down the street with their high school bumper stickers. So the loyalty and the regional loyalty of this area is unmatched. And, families typically stay in this area. And like just taking New Orleans, for example, one of the big ones is, well, if your daughter left, she's going to come back because they always come back. It's kind of one of those kind of deals. But I just think it's that way, and if you're a Bama guy, you're not an Auburn guy. If you're a Tulane guy, you're not an LSU guy. It's just one of those things.
Right. Last question for you. Visualization is such a big part of the game now, the mental side of things. Have you stopped to visualize what it's going to be like for when Tulane hosts a regional?
That's another goal on the list. I appreciate you saying that. And that's, the way you said that is how I would choose to say it. Like, again, I think self-talk's really important. Visualization is really important. And it's always, I get to and when, not ifs, not can'ts, those kind of things. So I think if you don't have that kind of self-talk and those kind of beliefs, then your players can't have it either. And I truly believe it. It's becoming more and more difficult to host because the powers that be see money, dollar signs. Oklahoma and Texas moved another 2 teams for the SEC to host more regionals, so that's David and Goliath, and you got to be really exceptional. Another reason why I respect East Carolina's ability to do those kind of things, because they're in the same boat we are. So that's what we're trying to get to, is the right to earn the opportunity to host. And you don't just get handed those. You got to be really good at this level, and you got to be really good for a long time. So that's what we're aspiring to. We're going to go for that, and that's going to be a point of emphasis. But those are all result type things, and as you know, it's really about the process, and the process is what gives you the best chance to get what you want at the end of the day. So that's what we're going for, and we're not going to apologize for it, but we also understand how difficult it is, and when you want something difficult like that, it takes uncommon effort. So it's going to take that, and it's going to take that in our league. Our league's very good.
Yeah, you talked about process, Jay, and it sounds like your process is starting to take root down there, man. And as a fellow West Coast guy, it's awesome to see the West Coast game kind of branch out. And obviously, as a friend of yours and a friend of mine, it's awesome to see your personal success. And so, Jay, I can't thank you enough for doing this, man. I know you're busy. I know it's a crazy time of year for you, but I really appreciate you carving an hour out and doing this, for not just for me, but for the kids and the parents that are listening to this. It's great to hear your perspective on things.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate you. Always great. And glad to call you a friend too. So thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to be on.